He grew up milking cows, not flying planes. Yet when war came, he faced Japan's best pilots and beat them. His secret? A maneuver so deadly, it defied physics itself. He wasn't a soldier by birth, just a farm boy from Wisconsin, who'd never seen the ocean until war dragged him halfway across the world. But in the burning skies of the Pacific, he discovered something no one believed possible, a maneuver so daring, so impossible, it turned him into a legend. This is how one farm boy destroyed 40 Japanese planes all alone. He was a quiet farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, a place where the winters were long, the fields wide, and the only sound you could hear was the whisper of wind through the pines. His name was Richard Ira Bong. No one there could have imagined that this shy, polite boy who spent his youth milking cows and fixing tractors would one day become America's deadliest fighter pilot, destroying 40 enemy aircraft in the Pacific skies. All with a trick that military experts once called impossible. But this isn't a story about glory. It's a story about courage, innovation, and the price of greatness, how one young man turned instinct into an art of survival, and how his impossible trick would change aerial combat forever. It began in the spring of 1920. America was still recovering from the Great War, and in a small farmhouse north of Superior, a baby boy cried his first breath. Richard was the eldest of 9 children, raised on hard work, faith, and duty. His father, Carl Bong, was a Swedish immigrant, the kind of man who fixed his own plow and built his own barn. His mother, Dora, kept the family running with the discipline of a sergeant and the kindness of a saint. For young Richard, flying wasn't even a dream. The skies above the Bong family farm were for clouds and crows, not for people. But then one afternoon, when he was 8 years old, a plane buzzed low over the fields, scattering chickens and shaking windows. Richard dropped his shovel and stared in awe. That was the moment. That was the spark. He started carving planes out of wood, sketching designs on scraps of paper. When he wasn't helping his father mend fences, he was building model planes and imagining what it would feel like to soar. By the time he finished high school, he was quiet but brilliant, the kind of boy who learned more by watching the wind than by reading a book. In 1938, when war clouds began to form over Europe, Richard enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Superior, where he studied engineering. But it was the sight of a military biplane performing loops over campus that changed his path forever. The U.S. Army Air Corps had started a civilian pilot training program, and Bong signed up. His instructor, Captain John H. Decker, later said, "I knew he was born to fly the moment I saw him touch the controls. He didn't fight the plane, he danced with it. And dance he did." Bong's natural feel for flight was uncanny, smooth, instinctive, like he could sense the air around him. He graduated top of his class and joined the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1941, just months before everything changed. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. America was thrust into a war that would span continents and oceans. Richard Bong was still in training when he heard the news. The base commander gathered the men and told them flatly, "Gentlemen, your country is at war." Bong's hands clenched. This was no longer about dreams. It was duty. Assigned to the Lockheed P-38 Lightning, a twin-engine fighter unlike anything the world had ever seen, Bong began mastering the aircraft's quirks, its speed, its climb, its deadly firepower. The P-38 wasn't easy to fly. Many pilots crashed before they even saw combat. But Bong seemed to understand the plane, every vibration, every sound. And then, during one practice flight, he did something that made his instructors furious, and then astonished. He shut down one of his engines mid-flight. Then he started looping. No pilot was supposed to do that. The P-38 was too heavy, too unstable on one engine. But Bong kept control, flying smooth circles before restarting the engine and landing perfectly. When the commander confronted him, Bong just smiled and said, "I wanted to see if she could do it. That impossible trick, controlling a Lightning with just one engine, would one day save his life." Again and again. By mid-1942, Bong was deployed to the Southwest Pacific, joining the 49th Fighter Group under General George Kenney. The heat was brutal, the humidity relentless, and the Japanese pilots, especially the Zero fighters, were among the best in the world. At first, Bong was just another rookie. He watched, he listened, and he learned. He studied the enemy the way a hunter studies prey. He noticed something. The Japanese pilots relied on tight turns and aggressive chases. But the P-38 was faster. If he could lure them into overcommitting, make them believe he was crippled, he could strike from surprise. It was the beginning of his impossible strategy. One afternoon in 1943, Bong was on patrol near Buna, New Guinea, when a swarm of Zeros appeared. He was outnumbered 5 to 1. His radio crackled with warnings, "Bong, break off. You can't fight them alone." But Bong didn't run. He throttled one engine down, making his plane appear wounded. The Japanese pilots, thinking they had him, dove in. Then Bong snapped the throttle forward on the second engine, rolled hard, and came up behind the lead Zero. One burst, and the Japanese plane disintegrated in flame. He downed another, then another 4 in less than 5 minutes. When he landed, his crew chief asked how he'd done it. Bong grinned. "I just let them think they were winning." That day, Bong's legend began. Over the next 2 years, he became a symbol of American ingenuity and raw courage. He treated air combat like chess patient, calculating, always thinking 3 moves ahead. He didn't chase kills for glory. He hunted only when he had to, and always returned to base with a quiet smile. By late 1943, Bong had 28 confirmed kills. Newspapers called him America's Ace of Aces, but for him, it was never about fame. When reporters asked about his victories, he said softly, "I just want to do my job and come home." The U.S. Army promoted him to captain, and General Kenny personally pinned a medal to his chest. But Bong still lived like a farm boy, polite, humble, and always writing letters home to his sweetheart, Marge. He painted her name, Marge, on the nose of his P-38, along with her photograph. Other pilots joked about his lucky charm, but to Bong, she was more than luck. She was the reason he wanted to survive. As the war dragged on, Japanese forces became desperate. Kamikaze attacks increased. Dogfights turned vicious. But Bong's strange, impossible tactics kept him alive. He would throttle one engine mid-fight, tricking the enemy into thinking his plane was hit, only to roll into a sudden vertical climb and strike from above. Pilots began calling it the Bong maneuver. It defied physics. It defied logic. But it worked. By 1944, Bong had shot down 40 enemy planes, the highest number in U.S. history. And yet, he remained soft-spoken, almost embarrassed by the attention. General MacArthur awarded him the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. In his citation, MacArthur wrote, "His daring, courage, and skill have set a new standard for airmen everywhere." By this point, Richard Bong could have asked for anything: a desk job, a stateside post, even a political career. But what he wanted was simple: peace. In 1945, after years of fighting, he finally returned home. He married Marge. The small-town farm boy had become a national hero. Posters, stamps, parades. His face was everywhere. But beneath the fame, Bong remained who he always was: humble, modest, and devoted to flying. When asked how he wanted to be remembered, he said quietly, "As a good pilot and a good man." In July 1945, Major Bong began testing the new Lockheed P-80 jet, America's first operational jet fighter. It was cutting-edge technology, sleek, fast, and dangerous. On August 6, 1945, as news broke that the atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima, Bong took off for a routine test flight. Witnesses say his jet's fuel system malfunctioned. He tried to eject, but the parachute failed to open in time. America's top ace, the farm boy who had conquered the skies, was gone. He was just 24 years old. When word reached Marge, she fell silent. She later said, "He was never afraid of flying. He was only afraid of not coming home." Richard Bong's funeral was held in his hometown of Poplar, Wisconsin. Thousands gathered. Veterans wept. Flags flew at half-mast. He had destroyed 40 enemy planes, saved countless comrades, and lived by a simple rule: never stop learning what your machine can do. His impossible trick, flying the P-38 on one engine, became standard training for new pilots. His legacy shaped generations of aviators. Today, near his hometown, stands the Richard I. Bong Veterans Historical Center, tribute not just to a hero, but to a symbol of quiet courage. Inside, you can see his medals, his letters, and the restored P-38 Marge gleaming under soft light. Tourists stop, children stare, and the old veterans whisper his name, because they know legends like him are rare. He was not born to kill, he was born to fly, and in the endless sky above the Pacific, Richard Bong taught the world that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about facing the impossible and making it possible. A farm boy who changed the course of war not with brute force, but with a mind sharper than any bullet. He proved that even in the darkest moments of history, one quiet man, armed with skill and imagination, can change everything. This was the story of Major Richard Bong, the farm boy who destroyed 40 planes, and did it all with an impossible trick.